The sea around Myojin Reef looked almost calm just before noon on September 24, 1952. South of Tokyo, far beyond any visible shoreline, the Japanese survey vessel Kaiyo Maru No. 5 rose and fell on slow Pacific swells above a patch of water everyone aboard knew was dangerous. The only land in sight was the jagged outline of Bayonne's rocks, a low black smudge on the horizon. Not far from it, a thin plume of steam stained the sky where the ocean was boiling over a hidden volcano. On deck, crewmen in work clothes moved between coils of line and metal housings, checking cables, watching gauges, and glancing again and again toward that restless spot on the sea. Below, chart paper slid steadily through recording instruments as echo sounders sent pings downward into the dark. The men aboard had been watching this patch of ocean for days. A week earlier, a fishing boat in the Izu Islands had reported the sea suddenly churning, throwing up foam and ash. For a short time, a low, dark lump of rock had pushed above the surface, where charts showed only open water. The place was known as Myojin Sho, part of a larger volcanic system that had erupted many times before, but rarely with such dramatic surface effects. Columns of steam and discolored water confirmed that the summit of a submarine volcano had risen into dangerously shallow depth. Japan's authorities knew this wasn't just a curiosity. A shifting cone below the surface could become a deadly hazard for ships moving through these routes. The Maritime Safety Agency needed hard data. A new island could rise and fall in weeks, but a razor-sharp peak lurking a few meters below the surface would be disastrous. They assigned the job to Kaiyo Maru No. 5, a research vessel used to survey coastlines and offshore hazards. Her orders were to steam roughly 450 kilometers south of Tokyo and document the activity at Myojin Sho, measure depths, track changes in the seafloor, and record what the eruption was doing to the water around it. On board were 31 people, a working crew, and 9 scientists specializing in volcanology, oceanography, and hydrography. They brought echo sounders, water samplers, thermometers, cameras, and notebooks. Their mission wasn't glamorous. They would run survey lines over and over, log depths, photograph steam columns, and note patches of pumice drifting across the surface. It was simple, technical work, except for the fact that they were doing it above a volcano capable of erupting without warning. By the time they reached their station, the new island fishermen had seen was already unstable. On some passes, a low black shoulder of rock broke the surface. At others, waves rolled straight across the spot, leaving only steam and milky green water to mark the hidden summit. The crew eased the vessel along planned tracks, while scientists leaned over the rails, watching the water. Echo sounders pinged steadily beneath their feet, building a rough picture of the volcano's shape. Submarine volcanoes are far more dangerous than they appear. When magma meets seawater, the water flashes instantly into steam, blowing rock into blocks and ash. Pressure waves slam outward through the water, hard enough to batter a ship's hull. Even more dangerous, columns of volcanic gas can surge upward through the water. Inside those columns, the ocean becomes lighter, too light to hold up a vessel. A ship caught directly above such a plume can lose buoyancy in seconds and drop as though the sea itself vanished under it. The men aboard Kaiyo Maru No. 5 understood the risks, but they could only see the surface, not the shifting vents below. They knew they were over an active vent. They smelled volcanic gases when the wind shifted and watched pumice drift past the hull. But the water often looked deceptively ordinary. Blue swells, scattered whitecaps, and a wide, empty horizon. On the morning of September 24th, their job was the same as the day before: collect data and stay what seemed like a safe distance from the vent. They had no way of knowing how quickly conditions were changing. Shortly after midday, the volcano erupted with a violent blast. No one survived to describe the moment, but later analysis of tsunami records and underwater sound detections fills in the outline. A powerful explosion tore through the shallow summit of Myojin Sho, blasting water, steam, and debris high into the air. A surge of displaced water rolled outward, forming a small tsunami later detected on a nearby island. Rock fragments and volcanic bombs rained back down into the eruption column, hammering the sea surface. Kaiyo Maru No. 5 was caught directly in that eruption. The pressure wave would have hit with devastating force, throwing men off their feet and tearing equipment loose. Falling volcanic bombs could have punched through steel plating, and if a gas plume rose beneath the hull, the ship could have lost buoyancy instantly, dropping into the collapsing water. There was no chance to radio for help, no lifeboats, no flares. The vessel simply vanished. Far from the site, instruments picked up the eruption. A distinct tsunami arrival and deep ocean acoustic signatures marked a single violent event that matched the period when Kaiyo Maru No. 5 disappeared. When the ship missed her scheduled reports, aircraft and other vessels went searching. They found nothing at first, just steam, discolored water, and floating pumice. Over the next few days, fragments began to appear. Searchers recovered pieces of wreckage that could be traced to the missing vessel, including a life preserver and lava-pitted debris likely struck by hot material. But there were no large sections of hull, no bodies, and no signs of survivors. Everything pointed to a sudden, catastrophic loss. News of the disaster reached Japan quickly. For the hydrographic department, it was the worst loss in its history. All 31 men, crew, and scientists were gone. Newspapers printed photographs of the men who had sailed south to study the volcano. Families waited for any word, hoping for a survivor or even a recovered body. None came. Officials concluded that the ship had been destroyed by the eruption with all hands. In the months that followed, scientists studied the eruption closely. Reports described how the volcano repeatedly built and destroyed temporary islands as lava domes rose above the surface and were blasted apart again. Tsunami records and underwater sound data helped pinpoint the eruption that likely destroyed the vessel. The evidence was overwhelming. An undersea explosion, timed precisely with the ship's disappearance, had annihilated it. Inside the hydrographic department, the tragedy forced change. Sending crewed ships over active submarine volcanoes was too dangerous. Engineers designed unmanned, radio-controlled craft that could carry echo sounders and thermometers into hazardous zones without risking lives. Early versions of these vessels were deployed within a few years and eventually returned to Myojin Sho, mapping it in far greater detail than any manned vessel had ever attempted. Decades later, modern research ships confirmed the structure of the caldera and the steep walls that rise from deep water to shallow summits, capable of explosive interaction with seawater. Myojin Sho had erupted many times before 1952 and would erupt again. The volcano that destroyed Kaiyo Maru No. 5 was part of a long-lived, unstable system. Outside scientific circles, the ship's disappearance took on a mythic quality. Writers describing the so-called Devil's Sea or Dragon's Triangle used the loss as evidence of mysterious forces in the Pacific. In those stories, the vessel vanished without trace, but careful research showed otherwise. The ship carried 31 men, not the inflated numbers sometimes claimed, and its destruction was fully explained by a documented volcanic eruption. For the families, scientific explanations could not soften the loss. They knew where the ship had been and what it was doing, and they were told how fast a shallow water eruption can destroy a vessel. But they had no grave, no wreck to visit, only a set of coordinates in the open sea. Today, ships still avoid Myojin Sho. Navigation charts warn of sudden eruptions, and while the Pacific can look harmless on a clear day, the spot where Kaiyo Maru No. 5 disappeared holds a quiet reminder of how the sea can erupt without warning beneath a ship doing nothing more than its job. Thank you for listening to the Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.